When people turn to the New Testament and ask themselves, what does it have to say about the political process and all that, often the passage which comes to mind is from Paul's letter to the Romans chapter 13, when he says that everyone must be subject to the governing authorities because God has appointed and instituted them, so you have to obey for conscience sake and because that's how God wants it to be. Tragically, many totalitarian regimes have quoted that passage in order to bully Christians themselves to do things or to collude with things which those Christians knew were not how it should be. I think of apartheid South Africa as an obvious example. But actually, Paul in that passage isn't saying that whatever the rulers do must be right. He's saying that God wants his world to be ordered, to be wisely ordered, because anarchy is always even worse than tyranny. Tyranny is bad, but anarchy is worse. And so God wants there to be wise rulers. But at the same time, and we can see this being worked out throughout the New Testament, at the same time, those rulers need to be reminded that God is God and will hold them to account. You see this in a passage in John chapter 19, when Pontius Pilate is threatening Jesus and saying, "Don't you realize I have the authority to have you killed?" And Jesus says, "You couldn't have any authority over me unless it was given you from above. So the one who handed me over to you has the greater sin." In other words, yes, you have that authority and responsibility, but you will be held to account for it. And in the New Testament, we can see Paul holding rulers to account, speaking the truth to power, reminding the magistrates of what their job actually is, reminding even the high priest when he's out of line. And that has been part of the church's calling from the beginning, in the power of the Spirit, to speak the truth to power. So that the Romans 13 passage mustn't be taken out of context. It must be put in the context of the whole of that wonderful letter to the Romans, but also the whole New Testament. In the new book that Mike Bird and I have written, Jesus and the Powers, we explore this and many other ideas that are around there in order to try to engender a wiser way of looking at the whole political process. Goodness knows we need that right now. I hope you'll be able to get hold of that book and find it helpful in these troubled times.